Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Ted Rowlands filling in for Vinnie. We are outside the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho, where today there was an extraordinary sentencing hearing for the Idaho University student murders. It was a gamut of emotions, and at the end of the day, it brought to an end a very long saga that has been going on since November of 2022. Here's the story. A story that has played out over nearly 3 years reached a dramatic peak inside an Idaho courtroom.
No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You orchestrated this like you thought you were God. Now look at you, begging a courtroom for scraps.
Victim family members were face to face with the killer as the judge solidified his 4 life sentences.
I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility in execution of the sentence where he will remain until he dies.
It all started in the early hours of November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Carnoodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus home. Moscow, Idaho, a quiet college town, was suddenly the center of a major criminal investigation. The man arrested and charged, Bryan Kohberger, who had studied criminology in grad school. Prosecutors say DNA evidence, cell phone records, and surveillance video all tied him to the murders. Kohberger even left a knife sheath behind with his DNA. Prosecutors wanted the death penalty, but in a twist, they reached a deal with Kohberger, a deal that kept the death penalty off the table, sparing the life of the quadruple murderer. That paved the way to his sentencing hearing, and many questions still remain about why this man committed this brutal crime that caused shockwaves around the country. Today, we watched the end of this saga with the sentencing of the defendant in this case, and more importantly, the victims were front and center, and the victim impact statements were extraordinary, and they ran the gamut of emotions. Judge Stephen Hippler even got emotional when he addressed the court. And he also talked about the importance of these victim impact statements in a case like this. Take a listen.
I've listened intently to the stories and pain that have been shared today with great awe at the courage and resilience of the surviving family members of those wonderful children. I've listened also to the surviving roommates, both in person and through their friends. And I can't think of how, frankly, courageous they have been despite the hell that they have faced. These survivors carry the responsibility of ensuring that the voices of these children, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, are never forgotten, and the positive impacts that they have had on so many lives are never minimized, and that the love they shared, the light that they shined onto others, is forever celebrated.
Okay, our first question of the evening, how were the victims honored today in court? To help us answer, Dave Leroy is here. He's the former Idaho Attorney General. He's with us in Boise, Idaho. And Gray Hughes is also with us. He's the host of the true crime YouTube channel, Gray Hughes Investigates. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. And Dave, first, what stood out to you? There was just the gamut of emotions from the judge to the different family emotions that ranged from despair, heartbreak, even anger.
It was a very human day. Everything that one could possibly associate with a dreadful crime like this was on display. Anger and pity and everything else. And what stood out with me most was the extraordinary degree to which Judge Hippler allowed the victim families to express their own emotions in whatever way they wish to do so. And subsequently, about halfway through the proceeding, how the audience would react to those with applause, never permitted in a courtroom, or even threatening statements greatly discouraged in a courtroom. So the judge was very supportive of everything the victim families wanted to say, but at the same time, he kept control of the courtroom.
Yeah, somehow giving them enough rope to express, but not over the top. There was never a moment you felt like, oh gosh, this has gotten out of control. Gray, your thoughts?
Well, I have to say, after the hearing today, they had the press conference, and then these documents were released later. And after reading, like, even the first 5 documents that came out by the Moscow Police Department, you see how horrendous this crime was. I mean, Xana and Kaylee were absolutely just savagely attacked, and I don't know how they were able to maintain control in there. I mean, you know, the Gonzalez's family, you could see that they had a lot more sort of anger towards the whole situation, which is totally, I'm more like how they would feel. I think if that happened to my family, I would feel like them. I don't understand how, I mean, it's just so amazing to be able to forgive somebody like Kohberger that I think it was it Xana's family member, or I can't remember which family member it was, but they forgave Kohberger, and I don't think I'd have the ability to do something like that. That guy is an absolute monster, and when you see these documents, you'll just absolutely be shocked at what this guy did to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Our Matt Johnson was reporting on some of the things that were released. It was just the specifics, and the more specifics come out in a quadruple homicide, the more gory details we're going to be hearing. We also heard during today's victim impact statements from the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. Bethany Funk had a good friend of hers who was there when they called 911 read a statement, but Dylan Mortensen was there in person, and boy, you talk about heartbreak. Take a listen.
Then there were the panic attacks. The kind that slam into me like a tsunami out of nowhere. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking. All I can do is scream because the emotional pain and the grief is too much to handle. I will still live with this pain. At least I get to live my life. He will stay here, empty, forgotten, and powerless.
I have not slept through a single night since this happened. I constantly wake up in panics, terrified. Someone is breaking in, or someone is here to hurt me, or I'm about to lose someone else that I love. For a long time, I could barely get out of bed, but one day I realized I have to live for them. They did not get the chance to keep living, but I do, and I will not take that for granted. So now every day I remind myself to live for them, and everything I do it with them in mind. Xana was 1 in a million. She was the life of the party. She was also the kindest and funniest person I knew. Everyone loved her because she made everyone feel so loved. Kaylee had the most beautiful, radiant smile. And she was so kind, but also one of the funniest people I've ever known. She loved playing little pranks. She always had us laughing so hard that we could not breathe. Ethan was the sweetest, most genuine guy. He was always smiling and always making other people smile too. Ethan was the kind of person you wanted around. Maddie was not only one of my best friends, but she was the older sister I would have always wanted. There was no one I looked up to or admired more than Maddie. She was truly a ray of sunshine, and everyone was drawn to her. They were all truly one of a kind, and they will be in our hearts forever and always.
Dave Leroy, how important is this phase of the process for victim family members?
Well, in Idaho, it's part of our Idaho Constitution that victims have the right to participate in every significant phase of a major criminal trial. And of course, the most seminal of those is the sentencing process itself. So we're absolutely committed to this as a process. But as you heard today, it was essential, especially where we don't have statements from the defendant, that this be as fully developed from a human perspective as we possibly could. And one of the things I liked particularly was how the theme ran through almost all 16 statements, that we must continue to remember and we must continue to live for those young lives that were lost. That theme, I think, was very important.
Yeah, it was, and it came from different perspectives of, religious, some were fueled by confrontation with the defendant, but it was you're right, it was a clear, we're going to move on, you mean nothing in terms of our lives as we move forward, and we're doing that for our kids that we lost, our loved ones that we lost. Gray, what's your take on the, now, that here we are, the end of this saga. Well, I guess not the end, because the discovery is going to be unsealed over the next few weeks and months by Judge Hippler as we move forward. But where are you in terms of what we witnessed today in those poignant victim impact statements as sort of a period on this process, the end, if you will?
Yeah, I would actually say that Olivia, which is spelled A-L-I-V-E-A, a lot of people spell it Olivia, I just want to make sure that her name's spelled correctly. Her impact statement was so powerful. I think that's the first one where there was clapping, and then everybody started clapping after that, but hers was kind of how it was cathartic to everybody in there. I think they all felt similar to what she said, and I thought that was amazing. But I also thought the fact that Dylan Mortensen showed up and spoke was just absolutely showed so much courage from her, because her and Bethany Funk have been absolutely just trashed and attacked by people online for years now. I mean, they have been accused of everything under the sun, and they had absolutely nothing to do with anything. And I'm glad that she was able to tell her story there and be part of that. And I was hoping that maybe somebody would have been there for Ethan Chapin, but I understand exactly why they aren't there. It just would have been nice to have it sort of completely rounded out. But it was sort of a good period on this portion of the case. It's pretty much over, but now there's discovery, and people will be able to put pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Chapins made a very conscious decision not to be here. They didn't want to, that was their statement. Their victim impact statement was to not show up and not to take any part of their day thinking about him, which is all, again, part of everyone's unique way of dealing with such a horrific event. Gray, thank you as always. We appreciate your insight. We're going to, Dave's going to stick around. We're going to get a break in here. Coming up, how did Bryan Kohberger react? We all reacted. We were fighting back tears all day. What about Bryan Kohberger? We'll talk about that next.
Instead, I will call you what you are. Sociopath, psychopath, murderer. You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser.
Matriarch of the Adelson family gets arrested.
Terrible. Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law, Dan Markell.
Prosecutors say a bitter child custody battle was the motive for the murder-for-hire plot.
Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
Now that the ship is really sinking fast, blood doesn't matter that much.
The Matriarch Mastermind murder trial. Live coverage begins this August on Court TV.
You're gonna go to hell. I know people believe in other stuff. You're evil. There's no place for you in heaven. You took our children. You are gonna suffer, man. I'm shaking because I want to reach out to you, but I hope you feel my energy, okay? Go to hell.
One of the many victim impact statements today delivered in the courthouse behind me in Ada County, Idaho, in the city of Boise. Bryan Kohberger sat and listened. And the big question going into today's sentencing hearing would be, what's he going to say? President Trump urged Judge Hippler to make him talk about exactly why he did that. Some of the family members wanted more information, probably, and still do, about the details of why and how he actually did it. Well, he had a chance to talk. Here's what happened.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, you have an opportunity to make a statement if you wish to. I take it you are declining.
I respectfully decline.
Well,
That was the most movement we saw out of Bryan Kohberger today. The question now, how did Bryan Kohberger react to the victim impact statements? To help answer that, we still have Dave Leroy, former Attorney General of the state of Idaho, and Dr. Carol Lieberman is joining us, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, author, and columnist. Carol, to you first. What was your take on him? You know, he is on the spectrum. Was his affect because of that, in your opinion, watching him, or was he trying to make a statement?
Yes, I don't think we can really blame it on his being on the spectrum. It was a roller coaster of emotions that people were expressing. It was like amazing, very, very powerful. And yet he sat there. He had determined before he came into the courtroom that he was going to be Teflon, that he wasn't going to let anything that they say affect him, hurt him, or make him feel anything. And he did that to most, to a high degree. His mouth was closed most of the time, and he didn't move. And but there were very subtle movements. There were very, very subtle changes that he made. For example, if somebody said something that resonated with him in some way, either because it made him angry or it made him think about something or just something, because there were all different ways that people were affecting him, he would blink. Now, blink more, like when something touched him. And then so with the people who were angry at him, he had more of a defense up, more of I'm not going to show that they're affecting me. And people, interestingly, what I thought was perhaps one of the most interesting things was the two people who were very vulnerable. Well, they were all vulnerable, but Maddie's father, Ben Mogan, and Xana's father, Jeff Cornoodle, they revealed more of themselves. And they were very vulnerable. And when he was listening to them, his teeth weren't clenched as tightly as, for example, when he was listening to Kaylee's sister or her mother or her father. So, for example, Maddie's father, was talking about his addiction, alcoholism, and how he bought his happiest moment was when he got these concert tickets for her, and it was really special, and you could just feel it. And then also Jeff Cornoodle, when he talked about how Xana would call him on the weekends, and and then he talked about how he was 7 minutes away, but she had said, don't drink and drive, so he didn't go, and of course he regrets it. I mean, when he was listening to those two, he softened. I'm not trying to say he felt compassion or, he really doesn't
You're looking at it through a different lens than we are. You're studying it. But you did mention the most explosive part of the day, and that was when Kaylee's mother and sister addressed the defendant. If you haven't seen it, watch.
I won't stand here and give you what you want. I won't offer you tears. I won't offer you trembling. Disappointments like you thrive on pain, on fear, and on the illusion of power. And I won't feed your beast. Instead, I will call you what you are. Sociopath, psychopath, murderer. You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought you were so much smarter than everybody else. You act like no one could ever understand your mind, but the truth is you're basic. You're a textbook case of insecurity disguised as control. Your patterns are predictable. Your motives are shallow. You are not profound. You're pathetic. You aren't special or deep, not mysterious or exceptional. Don't ever get it twisted again. No one is scared of you today. No one is intimidated by you. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your
You're not that good. In fact, you're not that good at anything. You couldn't secure a job. You couldn't get along with others. You couldn't even get a female to look in your direction. All because you are pathetic. While I'm disappointed the firing squad won't get to take their shots at you, I'm confident that the men in prison will have their way with you in more ways than one. You will finally get what you wanted, physical touch. Just probably not how you were expecting it. Hell will be waiting. Quick message from our youngest daughter. Aubrey wanted to say, you may have received A's in high school and college, but you're gonna be getting big D's in prison.
Dave Leroy, you've seen a lot of victim impact statements. Those two were doozies. Where did those hit home with you today?
Well, I have seen, as prosecutor and a defense lawyer, several hundred cases at sentencing where victims have made statements. I have never seen a victim statement that was more effective and excoriating the defendant right to his face than that particular one. That was a spectacular, insightful, well-delivered, psychologically appropriate comment by that young woman. And I think it took us logically and naturally to the place where the judge ended up, namely saying that even though you're stoic here today, you are going to have the death penalty in incarceration, and your 15 minutes of fame are over.
Absolutely. Something else. Olivia Gonzalez delivered quite a punch there. We need a break. Carol, thank you as always. Up next, is this the end of the story for the defendant? Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. This is a look at the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho, where today the end of a saga took place, the sentencing hearing in the Idaho student murders. And what we witnessed in this building behind me was extraordinary. The victim impact statements ran the gamut of emotion throughout the day. We were waiting to see what the defendant would say. He said nothing. He decided not to take the opportunity to address the court, but it did likely, this was likely the last court appearance for Bryan Kohberger, as he is now in the hands of the Department of Corrections in the state of Idaho, again, bringing to an end a years-long story that touched people around the world. Here is that story.
In the stillness of a cold November night, a quiet college town was shattered by a horror it had never known. 4 promising University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Cornoodle, and Ethan Chapin, were found brutally stabbed to death inside their off-campus home. There were no screams reported, no cries for help, just the grim discovery that would haunt a community and captivate the nation. The man prosecutors say committed these unthinkable acts, Bryan Kohberger, was arrested. They said they had mountains of evidence: DNA, phone records, surveillance, expected testimony from a DoorDash delivery driver who claimed to have spotted the killer outside the crime scene. But now Kohberger has pled guilty, avoiding a trial and dodging the death penalty. At his sentencing hearing, victim family members let out their anger face-to-face in court. But the motive, it's still a mystery. So is whether Kohberger will reveal anything about these shocking crimes in the future.
Of course, both sides were ready for trial until this deal was struck in early July. The deal was, Bryan Kohberger, you plead guilty and you'll avoid the death penalty. So today, the sentence was handed down by Judge Stephen Hippler. And we all knew what it was going to be, but it was still dramatic when he sentenced Bryan Kohberger to 4 consecutive life terms.
I hereby sentence Mr. Kohberger as follows. Count 2, first-degree murder of Madison Mogen. I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On count 3, for first-degree murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On count 4, for the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On count 5, for the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sentences on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shall run consecutively to one another. I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility in execution of the sentence where he will remain until he dies.
So that's it. It's over, right? He's off to the state pen for the rest of his life. But our question, is this the end of Bryan Kohberger's story? Are going to hear more. Dave Leroy's still with us. He's the former Attorney General in the state of Idaho, also the former Lieutenant Governor. And journalist Howard Blum is with us, an author of When the Night Comes Falling, about the Idaho student murders. Dave, did you expect him to say anything today? And do you expect him to say something eventually to somebody, maybe on his own terms?
Well, of course, there's some pressure to do that in today's world. There'll be books about the books and documentaries about the documentaries. I've got requests to talk on blogs next week. I thought the judge did a very good and insightful thing in suggesting that we give less emphasis to worrying in the future about the why, and because that, in effect, empowers Kohberger, and instead concentrate on memorializing the young students. But of course, there'll be pressures to have him talk or to solicit him to talk. He won't be able to profit from any such thing per Idaho statute. But I do expect that hopefully, as a judge challenged, that some criminal behaviorists will study him closely so that we might understand and prevent future activity of this nature.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that that's exactly what he was doing, studying serial killers, and decided to try to emulate one of them. Howard, what's your take? Is this it? Is this it for Bryan Kohberger's story, or?
No, I think it's just the end of perhaps the first act. I think what we're going to see is Olivia Goncalves asked Bryan Kohberger a lot of questions. Those questions were largely based on his master thesis. He included those questions. He sent them out to prisoners to find out what they were thinking. I think in the years ahead, people will come to Bryan Kohberger's jail cell, and he will give the answers or some version of those answers to those questions. I think Mr. Thompson, Judge Hippler, said this is the time to move on. I think the Goncalves family was closer to the truth, that you really can't move on without answers. The past is not past, and I think we're going to be hearing from Bryan Kohberger for years and years to come.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you know, we know that this story is not completely told because all of the information isn't out, right? The dissemination order was lifted, but the gag order is still in place in the terms of the redacted documents that will be released piecemeal as Judge Hippler goes through them, and they are redacted. And today we received some of those documents already, talking about the horrific nature of the crime. And for the first time since the gag order was lifted, we heard from investigators and prosecutors who have been living with this case since it began in November of 2022. And they talked about a couple things. One, why they believe that Bryan Kohberger chose this location, and then the elusive question, and that is motive.
The evidence suggested that there was a reason that this particular house was chosen. What that reason is, we don't know. We don't know who the target was, and we're not going to speculate on that up here today. But we can tell you that for whatever reason, Mr. Kohberger chose that residence. Perhaps it's the location, layout, we don't know. But that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's what that statement likely led to. That area is frequented by many, many people at all hours of the night when college is in session. So what Darren and I have surmised is that perhaps it's the old hiding in plain sight. There's lots of people around, there's lots of vehicles around at all hours. It's not isolated where you'd be noticed, so that's where that comment comes from.
It does, and no, it doesn't make sense, and it's if you were in that neighborhood at all, it's a very complicated neighborhood. It's very closed in, but at the same time, there's everything from college kids to adults that live there, people that have full-time jobs, part-time jobs, so any one of us could come and go and fit in there.
Did the lack of known reason or the motive concern you in prepping for trial? Because juries tend to want to explore the motive or reason for a crime. And also, how do you as investigators and attorneys grapple with that? Because you can't rationalize something irrational, and how do you continue knowing that maybe you won't get an answer?
Well, I'll tell you from an investigator standpoint, we already know and realize we often don't get to know that. We want it. We all do. We naturally want that. But the reality is it's not something that we have to have or that we get. And the reality also is that oftentimes those very things that you're asking about, they're only known to one person. And it's the person that commits those crimes. And I think that's probably what we have here.
And I would add that going through this whole investigation, I'd probably say it's easier than it was for Bill's offices. We were focused on a task. We had a task to do, and it was discovering evidence and interviewing folks and that sort of thing. So the motive necessarily doesn't play a part in that, right? Obviously it can, but we were just focused on getting the job done in the correct way as best we could.
Howard, we were led to believe by a lot of people that Madison was the target. Not so, according to investigators. How much are we going to learn once all of this has been released?
I think what we have now is questions, and that's what makes this whole sentencing plea settlement so frustrating for the families, for the people of Idaho, and for the people around the country who've been watching it. We get various theories. I could speculate, and I could go on why I think Maddie was indeed the target, but that's just speculation. I think we need answers. I think the way Olivia Gonsalves confronted him and asked questions, I would have liked to have had the court demand that before they agreed to a plea bargain.
Yeah. I think a lot of people share your sentiment there. Thank you, Howard, for your time. We appreciate it. As always, we're going to get a break still to come. What can we expect from, well, what can Bryan Kohberger expect now? This part of the equation's over. He is no longer in a jail. He's heading to the penitentiary. We'll talk about that. His time in prison next.
In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration.
Matriarch of the Adelson family gets arrested.
Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law, Dan Markell.
Prosecutors say a bitter child custody battle was the motive for the murder-for-hire plot.
Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
Now that the ship is really sinking fast, blood doesn't matter that much.
The Matriarch Mastermind murder trial. Live coverage begins this August on Court TV.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, you have an opportunity to make a statement if you wish to. I take it you are declining.
I respectfully decline.
Well.
That was Bryan Kohberger not saying a word in court today. Judge Hippler, though, did sentence him to life sentences, 4 consecutive life sentences. He'll be spending the rest of his time in a penitentiary here in Idaho. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but here's that moment where the end of Kohberger's legal proceedings happened.
During the quiet morning hours of November 13, 2022, a faceless coward breached the tranquility of 6 beautiful young people and senselessly slaughtered them, 4 of them. This unfathomable and senseless act of evil has caused immeasurable pain and loss. No parent should ever have to bury their child. This is the greatest tragedy that can be inflicted upon a person. Parents who took their children to college in a truck filled with moving boxes, had to bring them home in hearses lined with coffins. In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration. I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility in execution of the sentence where he will remain until he dies.
Judge Stephen Hippler with the last words for Bryan Kohberger. What can we expect? What can he expect from his time in prison? To help us answer that question, we turn to Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who is with us tonight with a closer look at where Kohberger will likely spend the rest of his life. Cody.
Well, yeah, Ted, what a huge day today with this case finally nearing a close after almost 3 years. Let's first take a listen to Prosecutor Bill Thompson addressing the media following Judge Hippler's sentencing. Take a listen.
He has also received a life and death sentence, and that he is going into the Department of Corrections custody and he will remain there until he dies. And our communities are protected from him. Our communities are safe from him. And we have finality and conclusion, not just for the families, but for everyone who suffered because of this.
So, Ted, you heard him mention the Department of Corrections, but where exactly is Bryan Kohberger headed? Well, the Idaho Attorney General's office said today he's going to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, the only max security prison in the entire state. Now, it was built in 1989, located in Kuna, Idaho, and it has the capacity to hold 535 of Idaho's most dangerous and disruptive male inmates. It's also surrounded by double razor wire fencing that has electronic motion detection, so it's near impossible for anyone to make an escape from this place. Now, the population is primarily made up of close custody inmates, inmates under administrative segregation, and 9 death row inmates. Now, one of those death row inmates is a familiar face here at Court TV, none other than Chad Daybell. He's also housed at this prison awaiting his final day after a judge sentenced him to death earlier this year for the murders of his first wife, Tammy Daybell, and his second wife's 2 children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, that second wife who we all know as Lori Daybell. So, Ted, that's where Bryan Kohberger will spend the rest of his life. And of course, again, as you mentioned, we know he will be serving 4 consecutive life sentences for those brutal murders.
Yes, likely will not he will not see the light of day, and he will never be a free man. Helping us with our investigation, a former Idaho Attorney General Dave Leroy. Also joining our conversation, Sam Mangle, federal white-collar advisor. You're going to prison, you want to talk to Sam. Sam, what is Kohberger going to be faced with?
Once he goes into the facility and those Sally Port doors close, reality will sink in. Probably for the first 2 or 3 weeks, he'll be held in a solitary environment where they'll monitor him, make sure that he's not suicidal, and that he can then enter general population. And unless he requests some sort of protective custody, which will be substantially worse than being in general population, because he'll be locked in a cell 23 out of 24 hours a day by himself. Short of that, he'll be in a population of men that really, many of which will probably want to do harm to him. He's a young guy, he's somewhat scrawny, and he killed 3 young daughters and sons, the ages of the people that he murdered. So he's going to go in there completely unprepared.
All right. Sam, we got a little issue with the communication there. Dave, you're familiar with this institution that Kohberger is headed to, and what can you tell us about it?
Well, it's a general purpose penal facility with different kinds of classifications. And I think your speaker was correct that he will be segregated. But I don't think they're going to make an effort to put him in the general population for a couple of reasons. Number one, when he walks through that door, he will get the next consecutive number as a penal facility inmate, but he will instantly be the inmate with the longest sentence of any inmate in the institution. I think as punishment appropriate to his crime, he'll probably be kept in solitary confinement, likely for most of his sentence or all of his life, in part because he will be a target for the general population. I would expect him to do the 23 hours a day in the maximum security facility in the solitary confinement section of that facility.
Sam, what's worse, solitary, or if you're Bryan Kohberger, you were alluding to it earlier, in general pop, because if you have an inmate with a target, let's say you can conjure up, oh, I bet that guy, this guy's the guy with the biggest target, right? It's going to take up his whole back. If someone knocks Kohberger off, that's a badge of honor in the big house.
Well, certainly for the first, 3 or 4 weeks or few months, being in solitary is somewhat more comforting. And I use that term carefully because in there, he knows he will be safe. He knows that he will not be subject to attack. However, after a period of time, he's going to really be craving the attention and what being around other people brings. There's nothing worse than being locked in a 6x9 cell for 23 hours a day. And in many instances, it's 24 hours a day where you're only allowed out 3 times a week for 1 hour, maybe for a shower, or to walk in a very small enclosed mini cell. So he's going to eventually crave the attention of some sort of companionship and camaraderie and the things that go along with being in general population. I agree with your other guest that the institution will be somewhat leery about putting him into GP. However, at some point, they're going to have to, or he's going to request it. And just due to the nature of the facility, that's where he is most exposed and most at risk. My expectation is I would be really surprised if he lasts more than a few years in prison.
Oh, do you agree with that?
Well, that's why the director of the Department of Corrections is going to keep him solitary, in my opinion. It's our job to keep him alive, to make sure that that death sentence at the end of his natural life is a sentence he serves at the Idaho State Penitentiary.
And not carried out by fellow inmates. How difficult of a balancing act is that, though, when you're talking about confining someone 23 out of 24 hours a day or giving them some privileges and saving his life?
Well, the usual rule, even in max, is you can earn privileges by good conduct. But in his case, I think we will be able to justify that the extreme penalty of total isolation for the rest of his life is supportable as a unique defendant, a unique inmate who doesn't deserve any privileges.
Dave Leroy, thank you. Sam, thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate your insight into what Bryan Kohberger's life is going to look like in the next few days. We are done for this episode of Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Ted Rowlands, filling in for Vinnie, but rest assured, the investigation always continues.